My name is Fred Baumer, and I joined the chorus for the first time in 1995, and I'm currently a lower bass singer.
What brought you to the chorus in the first place?
Well, I had been a member of two different gay men's choruses, two other gala choruses, both in Boston and Los Angeles, starting back in the 80s, and knew that one day I would move back to my hometown of San Francisco. And as soon as I would do that, I knew I would audition for the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus because it had always been a dream of mine. I wasn't living in San Francisco when the chorus first formed, but I was in Boston when SFGMC came through on their tour in 77. It was an exciting experience. I couldn't wait to join. I'm so glad I did.
Wow. So you grew up in San Francisco.
I did. Born
What?
and raised and educated here too.
Wow. What was that like?
Well, it was a trip. I'll have to say San Francisco was a very different city in those days. We were a very working class, middle class family, and it was possible to grow up in a neighborhood like the Inner Sunset, where I grew up, and own your own home and live a very middle class, comfortable, and safe life. And it was in many ways, almost like growing up in a small town in my little community in the Inner Sunset district.
How did you end up in Boston after that?
Well, I was hired back in 1975 by an airline that no one has ever heard of anymore these days, called TWA. And I was hired initially as a flight attendant, and I was initially based in New York, and then transferred to Boston, where I lived happily for 10 years and flew the North Atlantic as a purser.
Wow. So that is when you first found out about the chorus, when the tour came through.
Correct. Yes, and the Boston Gay Men's Chorus was formed in 1982, I think it was, and I joined in the first year.
Wow. From the very beginning. So you've been part of the Gala chorus movement almost since the beginning, just in different
Correct.
cities.
Yeah. It was a very exciting time, and it was also terrific to be in the Boston and then Los Angeles Gay Men's Choruses during difficult times, such as the early AIDS days and when that pandemic hit. But it was an exciting time. It was a difficult time, and it was a time of anxiety and yet support and family. And
Tell me more about that time, especially it's June tomorrow. So we're
yes.
about to be in Pride Month, and for me, I'm thinking a lot about that time period in history as people in the news keep drawing more parallels about similarities and differences between that time and what we're going through now. But for you as a chorus member in both places in the late 70s, early 80s, what was that like?
Uh, it's difficult to describe, except even though Boston was not at the epicenter of the pandemic like San Francisco, it found its way very quickly to Boston, and men began dying. And they would come to rehearsals and would be hospitalized and come back, and then hopefully be okay, and then they were dead. And we would sing at memorial services, and we never knew not only who would be next, but whether that next person would be ourselves. So it was a time of great uncertainty, great sadness, and yet there was the other half of that, which was celebrating who we were, not only as individuals, where we would go out and party, um, but also take solace in each other's company. And we sang at endless memorial services, and it was something that I was so happy to see abate in '95 when I first joined SFGMC, but not completely go away. And of course, today with the COVID-19 pandemic, there are similarities, which I'm sure you've talked about before.
What I'm not sure the best way to ask this, but I'm curious about how you and your chorus mates in all the choruses actually talked about faith and hope and community kind of before and after the cocktail came out. Like, as in before, when it was completely unknown and nobody knew how this was going to work, if there was ever going to be a treatment, if there was ever going to be a cure, to the point where HIV was no longer a death sentence. How did the conversations change, and sort of the ways that people leaned on each other for support change?
Well, initially it was as though we were in a free fall, and we did not see the ground below us and had no idea what kind of a landing this would be, if it ever would be a landing. We had hoped for a cure, and we had hoped for a manageable way of dealing with it. And we were not sure of either of those. So we only had each other to lean on. And we had each other for that support. As the AIDS years went by, we caught glimmers of the ground below us, and we were hoping it would be a soft landing. And when as the 90s progressed and AZT came about, and there were other various treatments, no cures, but treatments, we were taking courage and becoming more optimistic about it. And then when 95 came around, it was almost a celebration. Not exactly a celebration, but it was less fear-based and more hope-based. And so we shared that hope with each other, and we tried to put the fear behind us. And we took strength in knowing that we were overcoming, and that our struggle to deal with those horrible early days was paying off for those of us who were lucky enough to still be around. And then since 95, we have built on the memories of those we've lost. We've also gained strength from knowing that we were able to get through it, and that it was the support we gave each other that enabled us to survive.
If there's a young person watching this today, I mean, somebody who's 18 today was born in 2002, very nearly in the age of PrEP. So what if somebody is watching this and kind of has never talked to somebody who's lived through that time, what would you tell them?
I would tell them to never take, this sounds like such an old person thing to say, never take your health for granted. It's really easy as a young person, which I was at one time also, to be fearless and to think that, the world is our bowl of cherries, if that's an expression, and that we could overcome absolutely anything. But as we learned with AIDS in the early days, that we were threatened by that as well. And I would tell young people that even though with PrEP and with the treatments that we have now, that AIDS is still here, it's still with us, it's still a deadly disease. And that, and don't play with that, to respect that. It's like fire. And we can manage fire and we can use it to our advantage, but it can also consume us if we're not careful. And so I would say, live your life, be joyful and celebrate the way we're all entitled to, but to be mindful of it and to not think that that anybody cannot be terrorized by it.